Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Tami Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and this is the very first virtual fundraiser we've ever done, produced by the Sounds True Foundation. And my heart feels warm and full of excitement about all of us gathering together to raise funds for the scholarship program for the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program, a 2-year program. We have over 600 people who have applied for scholarships. 200 of them are Black, Indigenous people of color. And our goal at the Sounds True Foundation is to raise as much money as we can and help as many of these individuals receive full scholarships to the program. Thank you for your support. Thanks for being with us. And we'll start this evening with Jack Kornfield helping us all come together here and gather with a short meditation. Jack, welcome.
Thank you, Tami. And I'm very glad that you all have joined to listen. So wherever you are, let's just begin in a simple way to steady and ground ourselves, especially in the middle of all that's happening in the world, the health crisis and the economic crisis, and even more deeply, the moral crisis and the racial injustice and the things that we need to respond to steady our hearts. So sit in a way that helps you feel steady and grounded on the earth, and allow your eyes to close gently. And take a couple of deep breaths. And as you sit quietly, let yourself feel the grounding of your buttocks on the cushion or the chair, your feet on the floor, and the connection to Mother Earth below you. Imagine or feel that you are like a great tree and you have roots that go deep into the earth. Feel or sense the roots of energy from your own body connecting down into the earth, leaving you steady and strong, even as the winds sweep the branches and leaves. Feel the steadiness and the strength that comes from connecting. And now gently sweep your attention through your body, starting with your head and down through your neck and shoulders and so forth. Noticing as you do anything that you want to release, any tensions, anything you're carrying that can get washed down through your body like a beautiful Hawaiian waterfall down into the earth. Steady, clearing, releasing. And now thank your body for all that it carries through these times. Thank your body and your heart as well for holding so much. And finally, bring your attention to the area of your heart. You have within you the great heart of compassion. O nobly born, says the Buddha, you who are the sons and daughters of the awakened ones, remember this capacity for compassion, courage, and tenderness. And as you attend to your own heart, let yourself become aware of the struggles and sufferings within your own friends and family. And how your compassion and tenderness opens to care for them, to wish that their struggles be eased, that they be held in compassion. And include yourself in this circle, your own struggles, held in compassion. And let the heart open further now to extend compassion like a beacon, a lighthouse, to those struggling or suffering, those in the streets protesting, and those in our prisons, and those in the hospitals, and their caregivers, and parents who are concerned about their children around the world, and all who are struggling or suffering, and even those who are causing suffering out of their ignorance and fear and delusion. Let the compassion spread from you to hold humanity in this earth with tenderness and courage. And then listen to your heart for an intention for your response. What does your heart ask you to do? Listen, you can know.
Thank you, Jack. As you know, we're here with 4 teachers who lead and teach right at that intersection of wisdom practices and social change. And here during this unprecedented time that we're in right now as a collective, we're gifted with having the chance to hear from each of them about their view, where they see the most important leverage points when it comes to the title of our gathering this evening, Love in Action. How do we bring our love into action right now? And we're going to start with Valarie Kaur. Valarie has just published a new book. It's called See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love. She's a celebrated activist and filmmaker and a hugely powerful, loving presence. Valarie?
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay? Beautiful. I just want to say I feel deeply grateful to share this space with you. Jack, when you dropped us into our bodies, I could feel the tenderness in my heart. And I want to share with you that I'm holding in my heart right now the image of Skylar Herbert, a little Black girl, 5 years old, the same age as my son, growing up in Detroit, Michigan, the daughter of first responders. Skylar was one of the youngest to die of COVID-19, and a pandemic that has disproportionately killed Black people. Her face, her radiance, lives in my heart right next to the image of George Floyd. I can still hear him. We can still hear him crying out for his dead mother as he was gasping for breath. And I think about how the assumptions that drove the policies that kept a little girl like Skylar vulnerable to this virus was the same assumption that kept that officer pressing his knee on the neck of George Floyd, not 1 minute, not 3 minutes, but 8 minutes. It was the assumption that Black people in America are disposable. And I could feel grief close my throat and rage course through my veins, and the fatigue. I'm a civil rights activist who's been in this fight for almost 20 years, the fatigue. And at the same time, I began to feel this rising energy of hopefulness. You see, I live in a neighborhood in Los Angeles that was militarized for about a week after George's very public lynching. There were helicopters shaking the house overhead, sirens through the night, National Guard, rifles out in front of my son's preschool and in front of the cafes where I wrote so much of this book. And we didn't leave the house until finally we ventured out, my son in the back seat along with my 1-year-old daughter. And I was so worried that I would have to explain the guns to my son. And I saw him looking out the window with just this look of astonishment. And I followed his eye line, and I saw that he was looking at the fact that our street had been transformed. Here in Venice, there were public art of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Trayvon and Tamir Rice, and there were BLMs with hearts everywhere. And he looked at me and said, "Mommy, did you do this?" And I said, "No, Cubby," because all he hears me talk about in this house is love and justice, revolutionary love. And I said, "No, Cubby, we did this. Millions of us rising up in our grief, in our rage, in our act of resistance, not just to resist oppressors, but to try to reimagine America as we know it. This revolutionary moment that we are in, I never thought that I would see it in my lifetime." And I've been thinking about this question that I want to offer you all, this question that I have been asking myself every day the last 3 years. What if this darkness in our nation right now, what if this darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if our America is not dead, but a country still waiting to be born? What if this is our moment of great transition? The midwife says to breathe and to push. And those words, breathe and push, and then, oh my love, breathe again, have also been echoing inside me. Because this is one long labor. You see, this revolutionary moment that we are in, this year of 2020, amidst the global pandemic and a national uprising for Black lives, the election ahead of us, I know it can feel like we're just trying to get from day to day to day, sometimes from hour to hour to hour, but I see this moment that we're in as part of a much larger cycle in history. Within 25 years, the number of people of color in America will outnumber the number of white people for the first time since colonization. And we are at a crossroads. Will we birth a nation that has never been on the face of this planet? A nation comprised of other nations, a nation that is truly multiracial, multi-faith, multicultural, where we strive to protect the dignity and the wellness of every single one of us, where we see no stranger? Or will we continue to descend into a kind of civil war, a power struggle with those who wish to return America to a past where only a certain class of white people hold economic, political, and cultural dominion? The stakes are dire with climate change. We know that time is running out. It's not just the future of our country, but the future of the earth, the future of humanity. And this brings me to you. You who believe that inner transformation is required for social and cultural and political transformation. You who understand that we can only show up to the labor for justice if we are summoning our inner wisdom, if we are leading ourselves with bravery and with clarity. You who understand what it means to ground ourselves in love to be able to fight the good fight. And so I ask you, I see you as midwives in this time of great transition. And I ask you, how will you stay in the long labor? How will you stay in the long labor? How will you keep breathing and pushing? And my offering is this, that every great nonviolent social movement in our history has been anchored in the ethic of love. And I believe that it is time we are seeing it. We are seeing how we are reclaiming love as a force for justice, for a new time, for a new generation. But how? I remember the moment that my son was first placed on my chest, and I was shaking and sobbing from the rush of oxytocin that was flooding my body. And my mother was next to me, and she was opening up her bag and taking out the doll and beginning to feed me, like feeding her baby as I was feeding mine. And I looked at my mother and I realized, oh, she has already known what I was just waking up to, that she had never stopped laboring for me. From my son's birth, from my birth to my son's birth, now my daughter's birth. She was showing me that love is more than a rush of feeling. Love is sweet labor. It's fierce, bloody, imperfect, life-giving. It's a choice that we make over and over again, even when we're so tired. And I know that all of us are so tired. When love is labor, it contains all of the emotions. Joy is the gift of love. Grief, the kind of grief that we're seeing in the streets, grief is the price of love. And anger, the kind of rage that we are seeing in the streets, rage and anger is the force that protects that which is loved. I believe that revolutionary love is a choice to enter into this kind of labor for people who do not look like us, even for our opponents and for ourselves. I believe revolutionary love is the call of our times. You see, when we are laboring in love, we know that the goal is not just to resist, but to reimagine America as we know it, to create something new. And so I want to leave you with a passage from my book called See No Stranger. The greatest social reformers in history did not only resist oppressors, they held up a vision of what the world ought to be. Nanak sang it, Muhammad led it, Jesus taught it, Buddha envisioned it, King dreamt it, Dorothy Day labored for it, Mandela lived it, Gandhi died for it, Grace Lee Boggs, may we all be like her. Grace Lee Boggs fought for it for 7 decades. They called for us not only to unseat bad actors, but to reimagine the institutions of power that ordered the world. Any social harm can be traced to institutions that produce it, authorize it, or otherwise profit from it. To undo the injustice, we have to imagine new institutions and step in to lead them. I believe each of us has a role in this long labor. That after we march the streets and we hold up the signs, it's not just about reimagining policing and public safety and criminal justice in America. It's about going back into our own lives, into our own homes, into our own houses of worship, into our workplaces, into our industries. There is no institution on the face of this country that does not need you, does not need us right now to stay in that long labor of transitioning it. And so I ask you, how are you breathing? And the reason I was so grateful to be here tonight is because this is a community, sounds true, you are a community who teaches people how to breathe. How are you breathing, my love? And then once we breathe together, oh, now how are we going to push together? Imagine the force that will be released when all of these people, all of this community shows up, not just now and not just in November, but in the months and the years to come for racial, social justice in America. I like to think that we will be someone else's ancestors one day. And as I hear my children crying downstairs, and if we get this right, they will inherit not just our fear, they will inherit our bravery. Thank you all for making me brave. I'm so grateful to this community.
Thank you, Valarie. Maybe we can just take a couple of breaths and breathe together and let Valarie's comments and the energy of her presentation sink in. Next, it's a great honor and a blessing that we have with us George Mumford. George is an expert at applying mindfulness to performance on and off the basketball court. He's someone who's been a mentor to so many young people, especially young athletes. And George, I'd love to hear some about love in action and what that means for you.
Thank you, Tami, and thank you, Valarie, and thank you, audience and fellow teachers and panelists, and especially the folks behind the scenes that we don't see that are supporting us and giving us a lot of love. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk. I've been very active on the virtual space, more so during this time of COVID, and getting to the place of dealing with injustice or racism. And the thing that has been consistent for me is this talking about the possibility of myself, which includes all of us, the possibility of being able to hold the hurt and then generate the hope. And so follow up on Valarie, love is active. Love is a verb. Love is something Eric Fromm talked about in his book, The Art of Loving, that it entails that it's something, love is active, and we labor for what we love, and we love what we labor for. And so, and love and understanding in my mind are the same. As when we love something, we want to nourish it and make it grow. And so when I think about loving and this idea of love, so we know the hurt pretty well. And the interesting thing about this whole process is the open-heartedness that's required to hold the hurt. And the hurt is tremendous. I'm not minimizing it. And I think we all hurt in our own different ways. But telling you from my experience being a person of color, a man of color, and to me, everything that everybody is excited about, this has been happening my whole life. This is not new. This is my experience. And so for me, I've had to, well, I haven't had to, but I chose to connect to my Buddha nature, my Christ consciousness, my divine spark, my masterpiece, because we all have that. We are wired for love. We are wired for compassion. We are wired for forgiveness. And so for me, it's understanding how do I relate to myself, because I have to begin with me. So how do I care for myself? How do I respond to my own needs, even when I don't think I have them? You know, especially growing up in this culture, I don't get stressed. Well, good luck with that one. When I can be still and know, I could see, well, I may not feel I'm stressed, but my shoulders are up around my ears. So there's something going on there. And so this idea of being vulnerable, this idea of being open to the possibility that is I'm easily hurt, and that there's a lot, this is very painful, and at the same time, not to get lost in the pain, not to get identified with it, but to also understand generating the hope. So how do I generate the hope? I generate the hope by focusing on love, on focusing on how I can be of service, on focusing on how I can feed my and create more love. So I talk about in my book, The Mindful Athlete's Secret to Pure Performance. It's kind of my story about my struggle with addiction. And in the book, I talk about this Cherokee grandfather just talking to his grandson, and he's telling the grandson, I have this ferocious battle going on inside of me between these two wolves. And I'm going to shorten it. One is, let's say one is the fear wolf, and the other one is the love wolf. And so the grandson gets very concerned and says, Granddad, which one will win? And his grandfather said, the one that I feed. And so if we want love, we have to be love. We have to feed love. We have to nurture. And love by itself nurtures and grows. It makes things that we express our love towards, it makes that grow. It's a growth process. And sometimes growth is, we have growing pains. We have fear. We have anxiety. And so for me, just to keep talking about, yes, it's hurtful. This has been going on for a long time, maybe more than 400 years. If you want to go back to Egypt, it's been going on a long time. But at the same time, it's like, what do? Are we willing to put some skin in the game? Are we willing to step up and not step aside and be willing to say, okay, I'm going to say yes to love, no to hate. And and this has been my experience, being a man of color, being able to mean what I say without being mean when I say it. To be able to be a warrior and a healer at the same time. To be able to understand it's okay for me to disagree with people, and at the same time, can I see their Buddha nature? Can I see that I and the other are one, and that it's all about, I can talk about it. I have a platform so I can talk and I can engage with people because I work with people from Yale or jail, locker rooms or boardrooms. It doesn't matter. But what really matters is, what do I do day to day? Can I look in the mirror and give myself care? Can I respect myself as I am? Can I know myself by being open to seeing how I am relating? And can I respond to my needs? And then when I can do that for myself, then I'm capable of doing it for others. So when I go to Whole Foods, that's where I shop, I say hi to everybody. As a matter of fact, it was interesting because I'm elderly. Well, I guess I get to go early, let's put it that way. Between 8 and 9, they got a special time for me because I'm more vulnerable, right? Because I'm over 65. And one morning I go in there and I walk in and I say, "What's up?" And the woman looks at me. I said, "I'm an OG with energy." And she cracked up. But that's just, my little flirtation, me just connecting with people. And that's what we do. So it's like, okay, it's great to be out there protesting. It's great to, really respond to the challenges we have. But what's even greater is in the moments when no one's looking, that we have compassion for ourselves, that we have love for ourselves, and we meet every person with love and compassion, with blessings. And sometimes I can radiate that and pray for people and say, may you be healthy, may you be free from suffering. But the real deal is developing my mind so that I know how to love, developing my mind and my heart so that I know how to be open and I know how to say, this is the only time we have. So why not just be all in with the love, all in with listening from the heart, be all in with just realizing I and the other are one. And the interesting thing for me is that sometimes I have to forget myself to find myself. Sometimes I have to just say hi to somebody else and smile at them, even though myself, I might be hurting. I might not feel like, okay, this is a great day. But to me, it's like every day I can make it my masterpiece. It starts when I wake up in the morning. That today's my masterpiece. This is the only day I have. And what am I going to do? How much love am I going to bring to it? How much love am I going to give to my parts of myself that I might be ashamed of, or I want to keep on the down low? That fear wolf. So they're both there, the fear and the love. But the one I feed is the one that grows, but I have to hold both. I can't accept both. And so to me, it's really more, my message is a message of love, is just love everyone, especially ourselves. And what does that mean? That means, caring for them. That means responding to their needs, even if they're not expressed. That means, knowing them or be willing to see them as they are, not as we would like them to be. And that includes ourselves, myself. And so we got the care, we got the responding, we got the respect, and then we have the knowledge. And so I'm just excited about being here. And I just want to share that, this idea of just love everything, everyone. And it's not like things are great and I'm being Pollyanna. No, it's like embracing the whole thing. So can I see every experience that I have with myself and others as of equal value? Because a friend of mine has a program I'll in with this. 2 years ago, I went to the Indian reservation or Native American reservation, and he has a program, an amazing program. It's called Love Has No Color. Love has no color. That's what this is about. So I'll end with that. Thank you all.
Thank you, George. And again, we can just take a couple of breaths and let George's comments and the energy of his presentation sink in. And now it's a great delight to bring forward Tara Brach, who, along with Jack Kornfield, developed the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program and put untold hours, talk about sweet labor, creative labor, lots of labor into designing this very powerful 2-year training program to create mindfulness teachers all over the world. She's someone who I believe has become one of the most beloved meditation teachers of our time. Tara Brach.
Thank you, Tami, and thanks to each of you. It's just a pleasure. I'm just still kind of digesting what I just heard. To listen to Valarie talk about revolutionary love and to see no stranger and to feel the passion and compassion, and to listen to George and that phrase right from the start, hold the hurt, generate the hope. Wow. So my friends, thank you for being here, and thank you all of you for being part of this. So I'm reflecting on all the places, the tender points of suffering that we have, whether it's the destruction of our larger body, this earth, or the racial violence, all the different ways of inequity. And they in some way come down to the same root over and over when I really reflect. And I love the words of Mother Teresa. She says, we suffer because we forget our belonging to each other. We just forget our belonging. And I think the reason that in the midst of such crisis, more and more people are turning to spiritual practice, to mindfulness, to the mindfulness trainings. I mean, we have so many people wanting to teach other people how to do this, is because we get it when we're in crisis, that the old ways we're doing it don't work. We have to call on something deeper and more powerful and more pure, which speaks to the love that George was just talking about, and the quality of presence. I mean, we can't hold the hurt unless we know how to be present. So the hope is, and this is my hope, and I'm feeling more hope, I think, than I felt, and I don't know how long, because it's just here, it's in my body. But the hope is that this is a real acceleration in consciousness going on, where our hearts break open to care in a way that can be more sustained. And the wound that's calling for our most direct attention is what, to me, is clearly a caste system. I don't know another way to really think of it. It's a caste system. And our brains are kind of, the architecture of our brains create caste systems. They've been going on all over the earth, everywhere. And we have this capacity in our evolving consciousness to wake up and see something larger, to see that equality that George was talking about, that whoever we look at, we can see the light, the spirit, the goodness. We have that capacity. So our challenge, can we see the caste system, see our parts in it? Can we wake up from it? Just to see it on all the levels, and, in the United States, at the bottom of our caste system are Black people, and then so many others, Indigenous and Asian and Latinx and so on. It's the target of horrific violence. Can we see our caste system? Can we see our part? And can we dedicate to waking up from it? Because if we don't, the suffering of it will continue to haunt us. I was doing an event some weeks ago, and a Nigerian woman shared an African proverb that has just stayed with me. I just keep mulling over it. And it goes like this. It says that the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. The child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. So deep in us is that longing for belonging. It's so deep. And I imagine most of us listening know what it's like to be pushed away, to feel like we're not loved. Most of us have had that experience, some of being abused and traumatized. And also many of us are waking up to the pain of pushing away and excluding and being numb and not paying attention to how we have a privilege that means others are denied of it. And I'll speak personally that it's increasingly clear to me that living in a fairly white bubble for these decades has disconnected me from reality in a very real way. It's disconnected me from a richness and a beauty in being part of the whole village, that I've been smaller because of it. So it's not a correct political good thing to be doing, to be deepening attention to racial violence. It's for the sake of freedom, of being whole. I want to share two conversations, because part of my path has been to extend myself in ways, deepen relationships with people of difference, and in that process to listen more, just to listen, to ask questions and listen, to really try to understand more. So two conversations in the last month. One first was with a Black friend who had been at Lafayette Square protesting, and the day that people were tear gassed, and came back days after. And he described to me how he was standing there and everybody's screaming, Black Lives Matter. And when he looked around and saw that a majority of those people were white, he broke down weeping. And he said to me, it was because it made me feel more human. It's so deep in us to have others. We really want to feel seen. We want to feel felt, cared about. And just that sense of, wow, people get it. Another friend. This is an older Black woman, a civil rights activist of many, many years. And I saw her at the Vigil of Grieving Mothers. That was in 2014, where we're all mourning the lynching and murders of Michael Brown and so many others. And I'm in touch with her on and off. So last week she said, Tara, I'm hopeful. And I am scaredless of being hopeful. She said, so many rounds now, there seems to be attention or caring. You know, she was in the 60s. Right now, she says, it's showing up at protests. It's the thing now for whites, you know, to go to the protest. But will they forget? Will they go on to the next thing? So I bring this up because to sustain caring, that's the deal right now. We need to sustain caring. And that requires a real shift in consciousness, like where there's a critical mass that's shifting from that I to we, that feeling of us and them to really the village. And that takes training. That takes the inner trainings that we teach people to teach through MMTCP, and that are spreading around the world, you know, and have been for the last decades in a way that just blows everyone's minds. It's just happening so much. They're so valued. We all get stressed and we forget about loving. We forget about loving ourselves. We turn on ourselves. We get stressed and we turn on each other, and we get stressed and others become bad others. So for white people right now, this moment, what's leveraged? I just feel like we need to take these teachings of mindfulness and compassion and bring that inquiry. Can we look at our whiteness? You know, can we have the courage to stay with the feelings of guilt or shame or defendedness? And can we do that together? We need affinity groups. We need to be together in it, because otherwise we just take it too personally, and we can't tolerate it, and we get contracted. For white people, we need to really be able to be with that white fragility and read the book White Fragility and be with each other, bringing mindfulness and compassion to what's here. We need to step out of our bubble and hang out with people who aren't like us. We mostly hang out with people that are just like us. So we need to stretch and listen and be with others. And for Black and Indigenous and people of color, to bring these practices alive individually and in community is an incredible process of the self-care and the self-healing that's needed to respond to the trauma that's been in these bodies, these Black bodies, for generations. It's so needed. One friend of mine here in DC brings mindfulness to teens, and he describes in doing restorative justice, and this is a member of our teacher training, describes how sworn enemies, these teens, they start practicing mindfulness and they can start actually reconciling. They can start looking at each other and not seeing bad other. So my last conversation I want to share with you. So a Black friend in DC, he's a college professor and a preacher. And he was reflecting on the need of more people of color who are teaching mindfulness. And what he said was, our people are traumatized, and it's through the generations, and it's in our bodies. He said, these practices and teachings help us clear stress from the body and manage the everyday microaggressions, those micro assaults that set us up for chronic stress-related illness. He said, mindfulness practices help us regard ourselves in a positive way and relate to others. And then the last thing he told me, he said, it serves multiculturalism. It brings us together because we step out of our traditional religious affiliations and hold hands with everyone that wants to raise consciousness, to take care of each other. So I'll end with that and just say we have an amazing number of applicants, and they're amazing people that want to, people of color that want to teach. And they get it on the difference it can make for Black communities all over the world. And the access has been limited, like access to everything good has been limited. And we want to change that. Thank you for your help.
Thank you so much, Tara. And I think I was just moved, Valarie, when you talked about Sounds True being a community of people who breathe together, which inspired me to have these couple of breathing moments after each of our presenters. So we'll do that. And now it's a great delight to bring forward someone who is a true visionary pioneer, always at the forefront, willing to take those brave steps, a leader of the pack, Jack Kornfield. Jack?
Thank you, Tami. I'm just sitting here with my heart full and touched, listening to you, George, and to Valarie, and to Tara. And I could just stop with this and weep and smile and just feel inspired. Yes, I've been out on the street some. I've been protesting, which I've kind of been doing for 50 or 60 years or however long I've been able to do it. What's been really moving, there's something different this time. There's a sense of hope. And there's also a sense of, I don't know, maybe it's the beloved community that Dr. Martin Luther King talked about. There's a way that we really want to step out of our isolation, and we want to make a difference, and we want to have a sense of meaning, and we want to step out of the body of fear and the illusion of separateness. And I could feel it. It's different than just protesting against something. It's actually also standing with something, standing with what George talks about, love. And when you ask about love in action, I learned it, as we do, we learn it from one another. I was in the forest monastery with this Cambodian monk, 𝐼𝐚𝐤𝐴 Sananda, dear friend and colleague, during the Cambodian genocide. And so he was safe when all 19 members of his family were killed and his temple burned and all the things that happened. And as soon as the UN refugee camps were open for the hundreds of thousands of refugees, he went there and I went with him. He made this temple in the middle of the refugee camps that was just a roof and an altar and so forth. And the Khmer Rouge in the camp said, if anybody goes to this monk's temple, when you get back to Cambodia, you'll be shot and killed. So we didn't know if anyone would come. The day it opened, they rang the bells and invited people around the camp to come. And to our surprise, 25,000 people poured into the central square there. And he sat very quietly. He'd been practicing compassion and loving kindness in the jungle with me and learning these trainings. And I looked across the crowd, people's faces of trauma of one grandmother and her surviving 2 grandchildren out of 6, or some old uncle and the fragments of the family. And it were the faces of trauma and suffering. And I thought, what can he say? And he put his hands together and he just began to chant simply, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law. In Cambodian and in Pali, Sanskrit, chants they knew from their childhood but hadn't heard in years because of the Khmer Rouge. And he chanted it over and over, and soon they were chanting with him, weeping as they did. And I realized that he was speaking a truth that was even bigger than their suffering. And for 15 years afterward, nominated many times for the Nobel Prize, he led people on foot back to their villages. He said, you can't go back in a bus or a truck. You have to walk and reclaim your land and your hearts with love. And he would be chanting, hatred never ceases by hatred, in the front of a line of 1,000 villagers walking through the killing fields back to their villages, saying this is the only way to live. So I looked at him and I understood what this is what it means. Somebody who's been sitting in meditation, practicing compassion, now gets up off the cushion. This is love in action. When I was at the first and so far last White House Buddhist leadership gathering, Tara was there as well, under a different regime, shall we say. It's not going to happen again right now. I was able to speak at the very end to kind of summarize things. And there are all these beautiful Buddhist teachings about wise society, meeting in harmony, treating each other with respect, caring for the vulnerable, caring for the environment. And they're part of the same great teachings that you'd find in the indigenous wisdom of the �ဣ𝐤𝐭𝐡 or the African elders or Plato or 𝐼𝐷𝐸. I said, but here's the difference. They're not just ideals, but in fact, there are practices and trainings that can change our hearts as human beings so that we can embody these. They're not just something to think are beautiful, but we can train ourselves. And again, in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha said there are 3 kinds of miracles: the physical miracles of walking on the water or walking through walls or whatever, the mental miracles of reading another's mind or knowing the past and future. He said, but the great miracle is the miracle of education, that what one heart understands can be awakened in the heart of another human being. And there are, I said, there at the White House, and we know it, all of you listening know it, there are practices and trainings, 7,000 neuroscience papers and studies that have been published in the last few decades, that the trainings in mindfulness and compassion and loving kindness and so forth bring about emotional regulation, clarity of perception, greater physical healing, a steadiness of attention and inner well-being, and most importantly, increased empathy and compassion, the ability to see another with your heart. And these are things that we teach in this program, but most of all, they are your birthright. They are who you really are underneath all of these things. And in this time of crisis, with Black Lives Matter and the global pandemic and all the hurt that George talks about that we have to carry in some way, we also need something as magnificent as and great as the suffering. As 𝐜𝐭𝐡 said, here is a truth that's ancient and eternal, the law. The hatred never ends by hatred, but by love alone is healed. And we human beings, this is our great history. Somebody asked the anthropologist Margaret Mead what she saw as the first signs of human civilization. They thought she might say cave paintings 50,000 years ago, or, pieces of ancient pottery, or chipped spear points or arrow points. She said, no, it was a broken femur, a broken thigh bone that had been healed. And she said, you see, if an animal broke their leg in the wild, they couldn't run, they couldn't get food or water, and they would be prey and they would die. But this human being broke their leg, and some people carried them to safety and fed them and gave them water and nurtured them until they could be strong again. She said that to her was the beginning of true human civilization. And this is in you and in us, in our DNA. We human beings have this possibility and capacity. And what we're teaching here, they say in Zen, there are only two things. You sit and you sweep the garden. And it doesn't matter how big the garden is. It's the garden of the world. You quiet the mind and tend the heart with some courage. You hold the hurt you have. You evoke the hope that George spoke about, and you have a clearer and more courageous sense of what's possible because you faced yourself. And then you get up and you serve, not because you need to serve somebody else, but because it's us. Because when you get quiet, you realize that every breath you take, somebody near you just breathed. That everything you eat, every strawberry you get at Whole Foods was picked by somebody with a bandana in the hot sun and carried by some unknown truck driver and somebody who worked in the back of the market that morning to put it out. That you can't separate yourself, that we are a family and we're a love. And we're love. All the terrible things that happen are outshined every hour by billions of acts of kindness, by people putting scrambled eggs or oatmeal or Chinese noodles on the table for their daughter or their son. Thousands and thousands of times in every family. And so you get up and you feed the hungry and you promote truth and reconciliation. And mostly you have the practices that steady and sustain you. And when you get quiet, you can ask the only real important question: what would love have me do today? Warriors for the human spirit, says Margaret Wheatley, are awake human beings who have chosen not to flee. They abide. They serve as beacons of an ancient story that tells of the goodness and generosity and creativity of humanity. You can identify them by their cheerfulness. You will know them by their compassion. And when asked how they do it, they will tell you about discipline, dedication, and the necessity of community. So please join us in this community, and thank you.
Thank you, Jack. I'd like to take a few moments now and just open it up, actually. George Mumford, Valarie Kaur, Jack Kornfield, Tara Brach. Have you heard something in each other's comments that you want to underscore, highlight, comment on, ask about, something you'd like to add to what you said, anything. I just want to open it up and see what happens. Let's do it.
Well, I just want to say I feel so settled, like a bomb, listening to you, Tara, and listening to you, George, and listening to you, Jack. And it struck me that the words justice or anti-racist or solidarity, that they're not just concepts to hold here, but each of you were speaking to a kind of orientation to life that is personal and political, a kind of way of moving through the world. And it returned me to when I was a little girl and my grandfather would scoop me up in his arms and give me the words of Guru Nanak, the first teacher of the Sikh faith. Nako beri nahi begana. Nako beri nahi begana. I see no enemy. I see no stranger. Guru Nanak taught that we could look upon the face of anyone and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. This is the interconnectedness you were speaking of, Jack, how we can pull from our scriptures and songs and our stories and find this enduring truth. You are a part of me I do not yet know. And that truth, it requires us to live a sort of brave life. Because my grandfather used to say, love is dangerous business, right? It's, you can't just say, I love you, I love you, I love you. All talk, no action. Because if I see you as part of me, if I see Breonna Taylor, sister, George Floyd, brother, Trayvon's son, and I let their grief into my heart, then I must be willing to fight for them and with them in the face of injustice. In the Sikh faith, the model, this is Jack's words too, of a warrior, right? The model is the Sant Sipahi, the sage warrior, or the warrior sage. The warrior fights, the sage loves. And so I took it as a path of revolutionary love. And perhaps that's what this great awakening for racial justice is about. It's about all of us finding our path to be braver than we ever have before, to walk this path of revolutionary love together.
Any other comments, spontaneous arisings? Well, I think I'll throw out a question for you then, which is, as teachers, you've probably heard very carefully and repeatedly what the pain points are and the obstacles people experience in taking this incredible vision, you could say sort of like the heaven dimension that's been laid out here, the call, and really putting it into action in their lives. And I'd love to know how you can help people deal with those obstacles, the most common obstacles that people have to embody the vision that's being described here, that you've each offered in different ways.
I'll name the first one, which is that the problems feel too big to people and they feel like they can't make a difference. And they don't understand, you know, there's that famous starfish story of the great waves that washed up all the starfish on the beaches in this part of Mexico. And there was an old man walking down the beach. There was tens of thousands of beach starfish, picking them up and throwing them in the ocean. And somebody came behind him and said, "Old man, what are you doing?" He said, I'm putting them back in the sea, giving them water. And he said, "But there's tens of thousands. What can throwing back, you know, a starfish, what does that matter?" And the old man picked up another one and threw it and said, "Matters to that one." And there's some way in which we can feel like we can't make a difference, and yet everything that we do contributes to the whole. And in some way, you really just need a start. And when you do, especially if you meet other people, then there starts to gather that beloved community or whatever energy we want to speak about. And you realize that the fiction that you have to do it all yourself, that you're all alone, is just not true.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Well, another piece to add on is it can feel like the pain is so much. And like a lot of people feel like, oh, it's not like I'm cut off. I'm just hypersensitive and it just overwhelms me. And there's a feeling like it's too much to handle when we start opening to how much suffering there is. And again, if we're in it together, it's an amazing, different experience to be holding hands with others and working together. And I feel like this is, if ever there's a time that's calling us not to just say, what do I have to bring to this, but what can we bring together? That then we realize that it's like in the bodhisattva aspiration with an awakening being to save all beings. It's not me personally saving all beings. It's an awareness and a love that can save all beings, and that I belong to that. And if we take it personally, it'll feel like too much. If we hold hands, we have the heart space that allows us to move forward.
Thank you. George, any final comment to add here?
Yes. So two things that pop out for me. When I think of my own experience, I didn't even get to trying to save the world. I was just thinking about myself, and I had what I call the AOF motivation, or how I get motivated, and that's ass on fire. So without a sense of urgency, without a situation where there's no way out, like for me, like all of the exits, it's like, this is it. What are you going to do? And so that's one thing that I think about that helped me burn on fire. But in terms of overwhelmness and looking at it being overwhelming, I think for me it's just begin with where you are and begin with yourself. It's really simple, just simplifying it, because if we get in the head and we think about all the things we need to do, it becomes overwhelming. So there has to be, and this is where the teachings come in, and where if we have good friends and we can have conversations, to me, it helps if we can share our experience, strength, and hope, so other people can say, okay, he did it, so maybe I can do it. But when I can share it in a way where it's authentic and it's saying, so it's the same thing. It's like, there's my experience, there's a strength and a hope. And, I did it, and just not trying to proselytize, but just putting it out there so that they can see that the possibility exists for them. Because what it comes down to, and of course I'm into performance, and performance, if you read the text, is really about performing duties of compassion, love and kindness, appreciative joy, equanimity. So performance actually means to have active love, or active taking the practice and engaging others, whether it's through right speech or through care and compassion, generosity. That it's really about just beginning with baby steps and just saying that, okay, like for myself, I related to my recovery. I'm about 35 years and 11 months clean and sober. And if I thought about staying sober for the rest of my life, that's the problem. But day at a time, moment at a time, being in the moment, that's the way. We got the path. It's like, just do what you need to do. So I talk about make the next play. That's it. You don't have to win the game. You don't have to run a marathon, all at once. You just begin where you are, and it's one step at a time, and just cut it down into bite-sized chunks. And so I'm reminded of, I don't know who said it, but their definition of success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal. So it's a day-to-day, it's a moment-to-moment thing. That's how we get there. But if we look at the whole thing, it's overwhelming. But if we can chuck it down to be in this moment, do what you know to do now, and the next step will be given to you. Now that opens it up. And if we can have people around where we're talking about how we're going to do this, or how I did it when I had this challenging time. And people will say, well, maybe that'll work for me, because that's how I got clean. A friend of mine came by and he was sober, and I said, I got to check out, he said, let's go here. I got to check that out. I got to see. So we have to have in this, our relationships, and reaching out to others and suggesting, this is what I did when I get lonely, or when I get sad, or I feel like powerless. This is how I relate to it. And maybe there's something there for you as well. And this is how the brain works. It works in increments. So we have to just cut it down and just be in the moment. This is the practice is all about. The only time we have is now. And if we do this moment of mindfulness, it sets up the next moment. So that's too damn simple, but that's what it is.
And can I offer, Tami, how I experience George's call to be present? Because I think a lot about, these cycles in history. And for a long time, I thought about progress as linear in America, but if progress is linear, that, under this administration, and we are just sliding backwards into darkness. But if we think about the story of America as one long labor, then progress during birthing labor is cyclical, not linear. It's cyclical. So this moment, 2020, for so many of us, it recalls 1968. It recalls 1992. But 2020, there are more people now, as we've named, white people, non-Black people of color, standing, laboring than ever before. Every turn through the cycle gets us a little bit closer to what is wanting to be born, to the America wanting to be born. And here's what I believe. Just like in birthing labor, you don't know how many more turns through the cycle it's going to take. I don't know how many more I don't know if my children will have to turn through the cycle too. All I know is that in this moment, while I'm alive on this earth, my task is to be faithful to the labor, to breathe in this moment and to push in this moment. And that we judge our outcomes not by the success of what we achieve, because we may not live to see it. We judge it by our faithfulness to the labor. And I know, just like we don't go into battle alone, we don't give birth alone, I need to be breathing and pushing and be faithful to the labor with each of you in order to last.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. When it comes to putting love into action, make the next play. I love that, George. Make the next play. The play that we identified at Sounds True and the Sounds True Foundation, a play that we feel in our hearts will create so much good and change, is creating what we're calling more mindful champions, people who champion mindfulness, who become teachers of mindfulness, and who bring the practices of self-compassion and awareness, the practices of kindness and self-regulation to different communities, to different parts of the world, to different demographics. And we have a video that I want to play for you in just a few minutes of 3 people who are currently taking the 2-year mindfulness meditation teacher training program and who received scholarships to the program. And they're going to share a little bit about their experience. But before we go to that, Jack and Tara, I wonder, for people who are just coming in and hearing about this 2-year training program for the first time, if you can just briefly introduce them to the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program.
Sure. To give a general idea of it, it's a 2-year training that internationally, we've got people from 50 countries that are attending, and they get both content delivered, course, information and how to do, and they get skill training on how to work with the different practices. And we teach in different formats, so that some people, some of the time are in small groups, small mentoring groups of 6. They're with peer groups. And so there's a lot of one-on-one with the mentors or their teachers. They also, as a full group, we get together either online or now sometimes it's been live, but it'll be online this round for the whole group to gather. So the training basically, it stands out in its emphasis on how to bring mindfulness and compassion to relationships, to trauma, to our actions with the world, and to the different layers of emotional suffering in ourselves. And people after 2 years find that it's secular, spiritually deep, and they have this capacity to reach out into their communities and work either individually with people or in small groups. In the government, we've got people teaching in the government, in hospitals, in clinics all over. Jack, I'm going to ask you to add in, because I'm just throwing out a lot of things, but that's a few pieces of it.
It's been, to use Valerie's metaphor, it's been a labor of love for Tara and I. I've probably not put more work and energy into anything that I've created or that we've created together than this. And it's so satisfying to see and to watch. I've been training teachers for 40 years, and to see people who come in who have a meditation practice and have learned some skills in mindfulness and in compassion and self-compassion, forgiveness, and so forth, then take on the role to offer those to others. You get to watch them blossom. And it's a really beautiful thing. They get hundreds of hours of video teachings, of lectures, and how do you teach forgiveness? How do you teach compassion? How do you do self-compassion? How do you work with the questions and answers that come? How do you help people with, bodily pain? And then how do you bring it into action? And we have, of the people from the 50 countries, I think of this woman from Pakistan who I know, who's working in a women's center in Lahore and doing work for women who experiencing fear and trauma and anxiety and hurt, and teaching them how to care for themselves. Or the person who's been working in the Mexican border in the shelters in Tijuana for refugees who are stuck there, and giving them ways to steady their hearts and tend themselves so that they can figure out how to live a life wisely. Or the people who are doing it in big businesses, in some of the major corporations of the US or schools, or working for social justice or climate change. Somehow the program empowers people to find that which is beautiful in themselves, and to have a whole series of tools that they can use to go and then offer in their community or their business or their clinic or their school or that situation. And watching people blossom in it is one of the most satisfying things in life. There, when we give up hope, and George talks so beautifully about what it means to hold both the pain or trauma and the hope. I think of this line from poet Pablo Neruda, where he wrote, "You can pick all the flowers, but you can't stop the spring." And I think of it for the fears in climate change, that we have to do something, and we do, but there's something bigger that wants to get born, this process that we're in, that Valerie's talking about. And the same in human beings, that when they're nurtured and when they're given attention and when they're given the kind of care and practices that George has been offering for these decades to people, not just athletes, but he's also been working in prisons and in the inner cities and and then corporate boardrooms. And I'm sure the corporate boardrooms are harder than the inner city, frankly. I've no doubt about that. But doing all that and empowering people and watching those who take on these practices and learn to do them through the mentoring they get. They have a great teacher and a mentor group. All of that nourishes them. And then, like Neruda says, you can't stop them from blossoming. And it's a really satisfying and special thing.
I'd like to add, if you don't mind, Tami, just an example that is coming to mind that has been so inspiring to me, and that's in Washington, D.C. There's a program affiliated with Georgetown, and they've been teaching mindfulness to parents in the inner city. And now there is a whole group of these parents that have been really inspired by mindfulness, and the people in inner city Washington are struggling with everything, the worst of everything, and yet they're seeing how the practices are actually helping them to find their inner resources. So a handful, we now have about 10 or 11 of these parents that have applied to be part of our next training cohort because they want to be trained so they can teach other parents. And so what's so exciting is, and there's Georgetown's going to help to host this, is that they're hoping that they can get more of those parents trained and then create a training modeled after our program that's culturally sensitive to the parents, so parents can keep teaching parents and then have that model be exported to other cities in the country. So I'm sharing that because we're here talking about making it possible for these kind of candidates to be part of the program financially. And these 10 and the other, what was 190, 200 or so that Tami mentioned, the amazing potential for change that can ripple out from these people. It's just hard to put words around.
Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead.
I just had this jolt of excitement because I'm a civil rights activist. And what you are describing to me, this program is frontline social justice work. I think one of the greatest violences that have been done to communities of color is that our indigenous wisdoms have been suppressed, have been colonized, have been ripped from us. We've been severed from them. And we are the ones now who have held it and have lost it, and now who have been pushed out of access to it. And the programs, and we're carrying so much trauma that this is precisely the moment when we need our ancestral wisdom, and we need programs like this to return us to it so that we can build the resilience that we know that's already inside of us. So the fact that you are offering mindfulness tools to the very communities who most need them and for whom they were ripped from, that's why I believe this is frontline social justice work, that we cannot transition this country without what it is that you are doing. And I just ask everyone to get really brave with your pocketbook and channel money exactly where it needs to go. This is it.
We'll go ahead now and we'll watch this video of 3 people who are graduating from the current program share a little bit about their experience and how they're championing mindfulness in the world. Let's go ahead and watch.
Hi, I'm 𝐜𝐤𝐬, and I live in Winthrop, Washington. This is a time where we can really make some big changes in so many aspects of the world, and we have an opportunity to start to solve so many of the big problems in the world. And I know firsthand that mindfulness is one of the best tools to affect that change. In my life, I feel as though my practice is the single most important wellness tool that I have. And so for people to have access to that it's unbelievable. And when I think about the changes that is going to instill in them, and then after them, once they bring it to their communities, it just brings a smile to my heart, because I know that we're on the path that's going to really have real impact in terms of change in our world.
Well, my name is Manuela O'Connell. I live in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the south part of the world. As a scholarship recipient, it was fundamental for me in Argentina, that it's a third world country. Getting access to this kind of programs is really prohibited because we don't have the means to afford this kind of things. It's very, very expensive for us. I started a little bit right now in this COVID context because I decided to teach my practicum online and offer it for free to the Spanish-speaking population here in South America. And 100 people wanted to access to it. So that gave me that feeling that these kinds of offering are really needed into the world. And this is what I want to build more, being able to reach the Spanish-speaking population and translating material and working with all the people that I can reach.
To introduce myself, I am John Combs, and I'm from Arvada, Colorado. The importance of being a teacher of color is to be able to take your experience as a person of color, as a teacher of color, and apply the teachings to specific experiences that you have. I've had to, in my life, really focus on RAIN and other teachings to deal with things that I specifically would have to deal with as a person of color. You know, you get pulled over, the blood starts racing, you start getting a little scared. Maybe the police officer that's approaching has his hand on his gun. It's happened to me. And just being able to ground, be mindful of what my body is doing, where I'm at, has been able to de-escalate that situation. And that's something that I could convey to other students. That's a specific experience that I would have as a person of color. The baggage of that, being able to look at all of that and really focus the teachings in that direction. I mean, I've had so many deeply challenging things in just the last month. And if I did not have the practice as a life raft, I don't know where I would be. And if you can contribute. If you can be part of it, be part of it. It's needed, it's necessary, it's real work. It's not navel gazing, it's important.
I want to just say again that we've had over 600 people apply for scholarships to the upcoming Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program, which begins early next year. It's a 2-year training program. 200 of those people are Black, Indigenous people of color, and we want to greenlight as many scholarships as possible. Your contribution here to come and be part of this virtual live event, it's meaningful, and I want to thank you for that. We are going to distribute the replay of this webinar far and wide. And if you're joining us here for the first time, or perhaps if you're someone who already contributed, maybe you can give more if you've already contributed. Please give what you can. What we're going to do now is we are going to listen to some music from Nicholas Penn. Nicholas Penn plays the steel tongue drums, and he works at Sounds True, and he's a partner in Manistone Steel Tongue Drums. And Nicholas and the Manistone team put together this music video to express their empathy for the pains of racial inequality in this country, and also the sense that a deeper, long-lasting change is coming. And as you hear this music, if you feel called to donate whatever you can, you'll see that there's a button right below the video player, a donate button. Just hit that button and go for it. Let's listen to the music of Nicholas Penn. Again, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being part of the Sounds True Foundation's first, but I can tell you it won't be the last, virtual fundraising event. This has been just a phenomenal experience to be with all of you in this breathing community and to be here with Jack Kornfield, Tara Brach, George Mumford, and Valarie Kaur. I want to open it up for a final blessing comment, and then we'll end with a guided meditation from Tara. Any final comments from our esteemed presenters?
Yes, I just want to say thank you to everyone, especially all the folks on the panel, all the teachers. Love and blessing to you, Tami, and all the folks behind the scenes. This is a very powerful experience for me, and I'm happy to have participated. So thank you.
Thank you. Jack?
I heard in your words, Valarie, Langston Hughes' poem, Let America Be America. Again, the America she never was. And somehow in your words and George and Tara's and somehow out in the streets, I do feel hopeful. I feel like this is a change, a turning point of, the birth that you described, or at least the contraction that's leading to a birth that I haven't seen in my life before. And it feels so important that we all stay strong and stay steady and do one play at a time, one after another, and keep it going. And so it's just a pleasure to have, if I have to be together whether it's in the, birthing process or out on the spiritual warrior battlefield, I couldn't ask for better company than all of you. I love you all, and it's just great. So thank you.
Valarie?
Jack, I feel that way too. I feel joy in my body. And so it moved me to read to you the last passage of my books, Stranger. Joy is possible, even amid great labors. We cannot force it, but when we create moments to breathe between labor pains and surrender our senses to the present moment, notice the colors and light and feeling of being here, alive, together, joy comes more easily. It is a felt sense in our bodies. In the face of horrors visited upon our world daily, in the struggle to protect our loved ones, choosing to let in joy is a revolutionary act. Joy returns us to everything good and beautiful and worth fighting for. It gives us energy for that long labor. Letting in joy, therefore, is the 10th practice of revolutionary love, the core practice that sustains all others. It makes the labor an end in itself. I believe laboring and joy is the meaning of life.
Beautiful. And Tara, if you can bring us home with a closing meditation as well.
I am now unmuted and able to speak to you. Yeah, just to name that there's something about love and joy that's incredibly contagious, and picking it up in the field right now, right here. And it's something that each of us, as we touch into, we can just know that our very presence can help it ripple out. So it's in that spirit. I invite you, wherever you are, to feel if there's a way to sit or be more comfortable and at ease, to close your eyes, to become still. And take a moment to feel this life breath, feel this body breathing. And you might take a nice long deep breath, filling the chest and the lungs. And with the out breath, a letting go, letting go. letting go. And once again, nice deep, full in-breath. And with that out-breath, letting go, releasing, softening down the length of your body, letting go. And then allowing the breath to resume in its natural rhythm and sensing the quality of presence that's right here. Listening to the sounds around you. Feeling the aliveness in your body. Feeling the state of your heart right now. And you might ask yourself, is there anything in this moment between me and loving presence? And with honesty, courage, just to attend and notice, is there anything between me and loving presence? Is there fear, distraction, numbness? And sensing the possibility, just in this moment, of offering a kind and healing attention to whatever's here. You might even put your hand on your heart and let that love in action be a communication, really from your own awakened heart inward. Just sending any message right now that can deepen that sense of intimacy with your own life. Acceptance, forgiveness. Noticing what happens when there's a gesture of kindness. Feeling the heart space that's here, sensing the shared heart space that's really edgeless, that extends in all directions. And sense this heart space that's here as holding all beings everywhere. You might imagine our shared village, that you're holding the whole village in your heart, in this heart space. The possibility of all feeling cared about, valued, belonging. A reverence for life pervading. So we sense possibility. L.R. Nost, writer, says, "Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break. And all things can be mended, not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, unconditionally. The broken world waits in the darkness for the light that is you." We close feeling our shared prayer. May all beings feel held in loving presence, filled with loving presence. May all touch great and natural peace. May all find justice and healing, love and freedom. Namaste and blessings.
Thank you all for being with us. Thank you for your support. Let's create hundreds and hundreds of scholarship recipients for the upcoming Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program. Let's put our love into action. Thank you. Sounds true. Waking up the world.